Welcome to Blue Pyramid Stories. I'm Storey Clayton, your host. This is my friend Jack. Tonight we'll be celebrating Halloween with our first of two installments relating to Halloween, Now the October Game by Ray Bradbury. He put the gun back into the bureau drawer and shut the drawer. No, not that way. Louise wouldn't suffer that way. She would be dead and it would be over and she wouldn't suffer. It was very important that this thing have, above all, duration. Duration through imagination. How to prolong the suffering. How, first of all, to bring it about. Well, the man standing before the bedroom mirror carefully fitted his cufflinks together. He paused long enough to hear the children run by swiftly on the street below. Outside this warm two-story house, like so many gray mice, the children, like so many leaves. By the sound of the children, you knew the calendar day. By their screams, you knew what evening it was. You knew it was very late in the year. October, the last day of October, with white-bone masks and cut pumpkins and the smell of dropped candle fat. No, things hadn't been right for some time. October didn't help any. If anything, it made things worse. He adjusted his black bow tie. If this were spring, he nodded slowly, quietly, emotionlessly, at his image in the mirror. Then there might be a chance. But tonight all the world was burning down into ruin. There was no green of spring, none of the freshness, none of the promise. There was a soft running in the hall. "That's Marion," he told himself, "my little one. All 8 quiet years of her, never a word, just her luminous gray eyes and her wondering little mouth." His daughter had been in and out all evening, trying on various masks, asking him which was most terrifying, most horrible. They had both finally decided on the skeleton mask. It was just awful. It would scare the beans from people. Again he caught the long look of thought and deliberation he gave himself in the mirror. He had never liked October. Ever since he first lay in the autumn leaves before his grandmother's house many years ago, and heard the wind and saw the empty trees, it had made him cry without reason. And a little of that sadness returned each year to him. It always went away with spring. But it was different tonight. There was a feeling of autumn coming to last 1,000,000 years. There would be no spring. He had been crying quietly all evening. It did not show, not a vestige of it on his face. It was all hidden somewhere, and it wouldn't stop. A rich, syrupy smell of candy filled the bustling house. Louise had laid out apples in the new skins of caramel. There were vast bowls of punch fresh mixed, stringed apples in each door, scooped, vented pumpkins, peering triangularly from each cold window. There was a water tub in the center of the living room, waiting, with a sack of apples nearby, for dunking to begin. All that was needed was the catalyst, the impouring of children, to start the apples bobbing, the stringed apples to penduluming in the crowded doors, the candy to vanish, the halls to echo with fright or delight. It was all the same. Now the house was silent with preparation, and just a little more than that. Louise had managed to be in every other room save the room he was in today. It was her very fine way of intimating. "Oh, look, Mitch, see how busy I am. So busy that when you walk into a room I'm in, there's always something I need to do in another room. Just see how I dash about." For a while he had played a little game with her, a nasty childish game. When she was in the kitchen, then he came to the kitchen saying, "I need a glass of water." After a moment, he standing, drinking water, she like a crystal witch over the caramel brew bubbling like a prehistoric mud pot on the stove, she said, "Oh, I must light the pumpkins." And she rushed to the living room to make the pumpkins smile with light. He came after her, smiling. "I must get my pipe." "Oh, the cider," she had cried, running to the dining room. "I'll check the cider," he had said. But when he tried following, she ran to the bathroom and locked the door. He stood outside the bathroom door, laughing strangely and senselessly, his pipe gun cold in his mouth, and then, tired of the game, but stubborn, he waited another 5 minutes. There was not a sound from the bath. And lest she enjoy in any way knowing that he waited outside, irritated, he suddenly jerked about and walked upstairs, whistling merrily. At the top of the stairs he had waited. Finally he had heard the bathroom door unlatch, and she had come out and life below stairs had resumed, as life in a jungle must resume once a terror has passed on away, and the antelope returned to their spring. Now, as he finished his bow tie and put on his dark coat, there was a mouse rustle in the hall. Marian appeared in the door, all skeletonous in her disguise. "How do I look, Papa?" "Fine." From under the mask, blonde hair showed. From the skull sockets, small blue eyes smiled. He sighed. Marian and Louise, the two silent announcers of his virility, his dark power. What alchemy had there been in Louise that took the dark of a dark man and bleached it, and bleached the dark brown eyes and black hair, and washed and bleached the ingrown baby, all during the period before birth until the child was born, Marian, blonde, blue-eyed, ruddy-cheeked? Sometimes he suspected that Louise had conceived the child as an idea, completely asexual, an immediate conception of contemptuous mind and cell. As a firm rebuke to him, she had produced the child in her own image, and to top it, she had somehow fixed the doctor so he shook his head and said, "Sorry, Mr. Wilder, your wife will never have another child. This is the last one." "And I wanted a boy," Mitch had said 8 years ago. He almost bent to take hold of Marian now in her skull mask. He felt an inexplicable rush of pity for her, because she had never had her father's love, only the crushing, holding love of a loveless mother. But most of all he pitied himself, that somehow he had not made the most of a bad birth, enjoyed his daughter for herself, regardless of her not being dark and a son like himself. Somewhere he had missed out. Other things being equal, he would have loved the child. But Louise hadn't wanted a child anyway in the first place. She had been frightened of the idea of birth. He had forced the child on her, and from that night, all through the year until the agony of the birth itself, Louise had lived in another part of the house. She had expected to die with the forced child. It had been very easy for Louise to hate the husband who so wanted a son that he gave his only wife over to the mortuary. But Louise had lived, and in triumph. Her eyes, the day he came to the hospital, were cold. "I'm alive," they said, "and I have a blonde daughter. Just look." And when he had put out a hand to touch, the mother had turned away to conspire with her new pink daughter-child, away from that dark forcing murderer. It had all been so beautifully ironic. His selfishness deserved it. But now it was October again. There had been other Octobers, and when he thought of the long winter, he had been filled with horror year after year. To think of that endless month, mortared into the house by an insane fall of snow, trapped with a woman and child, neither of whom loved him, for months on end. During the 8 years there had been respites. In spring and summer you got out, walked, picnicked. There were desperate solutions to the desperate problem of a hated man. But in winter, the hikes and picnics escaped and fell away with the leaves. Life, like a tree, stood empty, the fruit picked, the sap run to earth. Yes, you invited people in, but people were hard to get in winter with blizzards and all. Once he had been clever enough to save for a Florida trip. They had gone south. He had walked in the open. But now, the 8th winter coming, he knew things were finally at an end. He simply could not wear this one through. There was an acid walled off in him that slowly had eaten through tissue and bone over the years, and now, tonight, it would reach the wild explosive in him, and all would be over. There was a mad ringing of the bell below. In the hall, Louise went to see. Marian, without a word, ran down to greet the first arrivals. There were shouts and hilarity. He walked to the top of the stairs. Louise was below, taking wraps. She was tall and slender and blonde to the point of whiteness, laughing down upon the new children. He hesitated. What was all this? The years? Boredom of living? Where had it gone wrong? Certainly not with the birth of the child alone. But it had been a symbol of all their tensions, he imagined, his jealousies and his business failures, and all the rotten rest of it. Why didn't he just turn, pack a suitcase, and leave? No. Not without hurting Louise as much as she had hurt him. It was as simple as that. Divorce wouldn't hurt her at all. It would simply be an end to numb indecision. If he thought divorce would give her pleasure in any way, he would stay married the rest of his life to her, for damned spite. No, he must hurt her. Figure some way, perhaps, to take Marian away from her legally. Yes, that was it. That would hurt most of all, to take Marian away. "Hello, down there!" He descended the stairs, beaming. Louise didn't look up. "Hi, Mr. Wilder!" the children shouted, waved as he came down. That's all we have time for this evening. Tune in tomorrow night for the conclusion of Ray Bradbury's The October Game. I'm Storey Clayton. Thanks for listening. Good night.